The chocolate bar in your hand is younger than you'd guess, only about 180 years old. But the cacao inside it is ancient. People were fighting over it, praying to it, and spending it like money more than 5,000 years ago. In this video, I'll show you how chocolate went from a bitter drink reserved for kings and gods to the snack in your pocket, and why it's currently caught in a price crisis that's made it more expensive than it's been in a long time. Let's start where it actually began, which isn't where most people think. Most history books get the opening wrong, especially the part about where chocolate comes from. It wasn't born in Mexico. The oldest trace we have points to a rainforest in what's now Ecuador. For years, scientists assumed cacao started in Central America, until researchers studied pottery left by the Mayo Chinchipe culture in South America. Inside those ancient cups, they found three things: starch grains from the cacao tree, residue of theobromine, a bitter compound that's in cacao, and almost nothing else, and bits of cacao DNA. That's from a 2018 report in Science. So humans were using cacao around 5,300 years ago. That finding pushed chocolate's origin back by roughly 1,500 years and moved it to a different continent than everyone had assumed. These people weren't snacking on sweet bars though. They were drinking something bitter and strange because they'd worked out that this plant did something to them. Turning it into a ritual came later. 6. The Olmecs work it out. Before the Maya, before the Aztecs, there were the Olmecs. Around 1500 BC, this early Mesoamerican civilization seems to have been the first to ferment, roast, and grind the cacao bean into a drink, according to the Smithsonian. That's a bigger deal than it sounds, because a raw cacao bean tastes nothing like chocolate. The flavor isn't there yet. It has to be coaxed out through processing, and the Olmecs were quietly working out steps that chocolate factories still use today. They passed that knowledge down through Mesoamerica, and the civilization that inherited it took chocolate somewhere stranger, into religion. 5. Maya civilization chocolate, a drink for the gods. For the Maya, chocolate wasn't a treat, it was sacred. They drank it thick, frothy, and bitter, mixed with chili, honey, or water, and poured between two cups from a height to build up the foam, because the foam was the best part. They also built a goddess around it, Ixcacao, tied to cacao, fertility, and abundance, and people prayed to her for good harvests. Cacao turned up at the biggest moments of a Maya life. Newborns were anointed with ground cacao and flowers at baptism. Couples drank chocolate and traded beans as part of the wedding. When a ruler died, the tomb was packed with cacao beans and the cups used to drink it. That comes from accounts collected by researchers, including Harvard's Chocolate Class Project. So it ran through birth, marriage, and death. All of it. The next civilization did something even odder. They spent it. 4. Aztec chocolate history, worth more than gold. The Aztecs loved cacao so much they used it as money. They called the drink zocolotl, meaning bitter water, which is where our word chocolate comes from, and they valued the beans above gold, according to history. Around 100 beans equaled a day's wages. 3 beans bought an egg or an avocado. 1 got you a tomato, which means a handful of candy could literally function as cash. At the top of it sat the Emperor Montezuma, whose court reportedly went through enormous amounts of the drink every day, and only royalty, nobles, warriors, and elite traders were allowed to touch it. So for thousands of years, across several civilizations in Mesoamerica, chocolate was bitter, holy, and expensive. To see why turning it into a bar took so long, you have to know how it's actually made. 3. How is chocolate made? The process barely changed. Here's the part most people never think about. Making chocolate is genuinely complicated. It starts with a pod, a big oval fruit that grows straight out of the tree trunk. Crack one open and there's no chocolate inside. Just 35 to 50 beans wrapped in white. Then comes the step that creates everything. Fermentation. The beans sit in boxes for 3 to 8 days while natural yeast and bacteria break down the pulp. Skip it and chocolate flavor simply never forms. After that, the beans dry in the sun for about a week, then roast at 120 to 140 degrees Celsius, which is when the smell we recognize as chocolate finally appears. The shells get cracked off, leaving the nibs, which are ground into a thick paste of cocoa butter and cocoa solids. The last step is conching, where machines stir and heat the chocolate for anywhere from 12 to 72 hours to smooth it out. So a single bite is the end of a week-long chemistry process built on a recipe that's thousands of years old. And eventually, somebody figured out how to make it sweet. 2. Chocolate takes over Europe and finally becomes a bar. When Spanish explorers, including Hernán Cortés, carried cacao back across the ocean in the early 1500s, Europeans had one complaint. It was bitter. So they added sugar, plus cinnamon and vanilla to round it off. Chocolate reached the Spanish court in 1544, and the first official shipment of cacao landed in 1585. For decades, it stayed a guarded luxury of the elite, basically a status symbol you could drink. But it was still a drink. The invention that changed everything came in 1828, when Dutch chemist Coenraad van Houten invented the cocoa press. It separated cocoa butter from the solids, producing a dry cocoa powder that was easier to mix, cheaper to produce, and far more consistent. That process, sometimes called Dutch process cocoa, is what made a solid, moldable chocolate bar physically possible. And then, in 1847, the British company Fry's worked out how to combine those elements back together and mold chocolate into a solid you could eat. The first real chocolate bar. Cadbury followed in 1849, and in 1866, Fry's chocolate cream became the first mass-produced bar. So, the chocolate bar, the thing we treat as timeless, is actually the newest part of the whole story. Which brings us to right now, when chocolate is in trouble. 1. The crisis happening as you watch everything you just learned is under pressure from a problem in the present. Today, more than 60% of the world's cocoa comes from 2 countries, Ghana and the Ivory Coast. Both got hit hard by bad weather, climate change, El Nino, and tree diseases, specifically black pod disease and cacao swollen shoot virus, CSSV, which wrecked recent harvests. Prices exploded. On June 13, 2024, cocoa hit a record of about US $11,530 per ton on the ICE Futures Exchange, a level the industry had never seen, and companies quietly shrank their bars and raised prices around the world. By October 2025, prices had dropped back to around $4,000 per ton as supply recovered. Still high, just less brutal. Meanwhile, the global chocolate market is worth roughly $127 billion, according to Grandview Research. That's a long way from a cup of bitter water in a rainforest. So next time you unwrap a bar, think about what you're holding. The end of a 5,300-year story the Maya prayed over, the Aztecs spent like gold, and the modern world can barely keep on the shelf. If this changed how you look at the chocolate in your kitchen, you'll want to see what those compounds actually do to your brain. There's a video on that on screen now. Subscribe if you like the real story behind everyday things, and go eat some chocolate. You've earned it.